I'm starting this bad boy today, and it is going to be a hell of a story. I'm very excited, though. Let's get into it, and I will be back with my thoughts and a review when I'm done. Can we bring back books having interesting hardcovers, please? I love this beautiful black, and then we have, of course, the painted edges. Really beautiful, really nice. And then on the inside, hello, that's so beautiful. Also, can we talk about how the US version of this is so heavy? It feels like I'm carrying a giant brick around with me. And the pages are so white. Ooh. I just cracked her spine. Okay, let's get into it. Hell's infinite possibilities. Isn't it fun? Hello nerds, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a brutally honest book review and discussion for Katabasis by R.F. Kuang. I'm going to be talking about what I liked, what I didn't like, and discussing some themes in this book that I personally really enjoyed. There will be spoilers in this. I will be talking about how the book ends, so proceed with caution if you have not finished it. Overall, I rated this book 4.5 stars out of 5, so this is going to be a very positive review, but I do have a couple critiques on the writing. Let's start off with a very quick plot summary, although you probably don't need it because this book literally just came out. Katabasis, whatever you want to say. Noun, ancient Greek, a hero's descent into the underworld. Katabasis is Kuang's second dark academia historical fantasy novel, Babel being the first one and my personal favorite of all of her books. This one is set in England in the 1980s as second wave feminism is fading out and before third wave feminism picks up in the 1990s. It takes place at the University of Cambridge and it follows two rival academics, Alice Law and Peter Murdoch, who are both striving to become the world's greatest magician. When their advisor, Professor Jacob Grimes, dies in a freak magical accident, the two students venture into hell to save his soul because a letter of recommendation from him is the only thing that will safeguard their future careers in analytical magic. And so they go to hell armed with only the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, the map of hell recounted in Dante's Inferno, and chalk to draw the pentagrams necessary for their spells. I absolutely adore Kuang's writing style, which is kind of shocking because I typically don't enjoy third-person narration, and all of her books except for Yellowface are in third person. She's just that good. I get so drawn into her stories and it feels like I'm right there with the characters, living it with them. I also really appreciate that she weaves in academics, but does so in a way that is super accessible and easy to understand, while also still demonstrating her immense wealth of knowledge. Like, this woman is fucking smart. Now, I was part of the people that did make reading lists to help people prepare for the release of this book, and my list consisted of some ancient Greek and Roman and Italian classics that employed Katabasis where someone journeys to the underworld. But after having read this book, I don't think you need to actually prepare as much as we were all thinking that we needed to. You can read this book without having read anything beforehand to prepare. You will still really enjoy it and you will understand everything because Kuang explains things really well. I'd say all you really need to know before going into this book are to be familiar with the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice and to look at a map of Dante's version of hell. For Orpheus and Eurydice, I'd recommend reading book 4 of Virgil's Georgics, and I've linked the translation by A.S. Klein below. And for the map of Dante's hell, I'd recommend the one in the translation by J.G. Nichols. If I can find a picture on Google, I will just put it up here, but hopefully you can see that. Can you see that? I hope so. I will be honest though, I did struggle with the mathematical concepts in this book, but I do feel like she explained them to the best of her ability, and I know she even admitted to having a really difficult time learning hyperbolic geometry to write this book, and also the main character, Alice, struggled with math too, so I felt like we were all in the same boat of like minor confusion. As always, mathematics induced in Alice the acute urge to weep. Girl, same. Me too. But yeah, I just really appreciate that it feels like Kuang is including the reader in the conversation. She is genuinely just so much smarter than me, and yet she makes me feel like I'm the smart one. She has 2 masters and is getting her PhD. She's written 6 books, is writing a 7th one. I have a BA and have written 0 books, and yet she makes me feel like I'm the smart one. I love her for it. I do kind of wish that Katabasis had endnotes like she used for babble, but honestly it didn't ruin the reading experience that they weren't there. Another thing I really love about her writing style is her use of literary devices, but more specifically her use of similes, so like metaphors that use like or as. And here are three of my favorites that I really loved because I felt like they filtered out such a hyper-specific emotion from me. Page 267 on the first page of chapter 18. Archimedes perched atop the railing, tail swishing back and forth like a pendulum. He, too, had his gaze fixed upon the water, one paw slightly lifted, as if in remembrance of swiping goldfish. It's so cute, it's so precious, and it made me feel so happily nostalgic. Okay, page 435 after Gertrude leaves Alice alone in the rebel citadel in the city of Dees. So Alice wandered down the marble path, feeling a bit like a child told, before the sun was even down, to go to bed. This made me feel like I was a child being scolded to go to my room. Like I felt like I just did something really bad and I'm go to your room, you know. And then on page 486, on the first page of chapter 32, this is right after Nick Kripke falls into the Lethe River. He seemed like an old man who'd come down to the kitchen for a glass of water and forgotten what he was doing. This one hit a little bit closer to home because I've seen what Alzheimer's can do to a person, what forgetting can do to a person, and it just evoked such a sad protectiveness within me. Like I really felt for Nick in this moment, and the entire chapter was just so emotionally devastating. The most vivid image I got though, and this one wasn't a simile, but I really liked it, is on page 304. This is in chapter 20, in the flashback sequence where Alice is recounting how Grimes groomed her and then assaulted her. She had no idea what she wanted from their union. She wanted Professor Grimes to devour her. She wanted to be that hunk of flesh in Saturn's hands. She wanted to become him. She didn't know which. Oh my god. I believe Kuang was referencing this painting by Francisco Goya titled Saturn Devouring His Son, or an equally disturbing painting with the same title by Peter Paul Rubens. My mind personally went straight to the Goya painting though, and I could not get it out of my head until this chapter ended. It was so visceral, it was so unsettling, and it literally left me feeling sick to my stomach, and that is good writing. That is excellent, fantastic writing. Now, when I went into this book, I had three really big hopes for it. First, I really wanted to see some good rivalry banter. I didn't know if this was going to end up being a romance or not. I'd heard conflicting things, but either way, I wanted to see some good academic rivalry. I wanted it to be like Anne Shirley Cuthbert and Gilbert Blythe from Anne of Green Gables universe, but more specifically from the show Anne with an E. I really wanted that vibe of that relationship, and I feel like we did get some pretty good banter between them. I really enjoyed their fighting, their little spats when they were in hell. It was quite entertaining. The second thing I wanted was a unique interpretation of the underworld. I think I was expecting something a little bit more trippy and illusion-y. The image on the cover kind of suggested that it would be like that. And even though it didn't have as much as I wanted, it was still very unique, which I appreciated. Having hell adapt to the individual who is experiencing it and having it be a reflection of the land of the living was just, it was excellent. Hell is a campus, okay? The Court of Pride being a library, the Court of Desire being a student center and dormitory, the cages in the Court of Tyranny resembling study cubicles, and the punishment in the city of Dees being having to write a dissertation. Excellent use of imagination. I give it a 10 out of 10. And then the third thing that I wanted was some good comedic relief and or some dark humor. And there wasn't as much of this as I was hoping for, but I do feel like the parts where we did get some comedic relief were just so well done, so I wasn't upset about it. For example, when they're in the Court of Pride and Moore is giving them a tour of the library and he's exposing everybody's sins, and he's like, yeah, that one over there, they would not accept papers written in the first person, and him over there, he turned his exam papers over far too loudly. Unacceptable. I was dying. It was hilarious. I loved it. So there are many ways that Katabasis did not meet my expectations, but there are also tons of ways in which it exceeded my expectations. Shockingly, this book had a happy ending. Kuang is notorious for ripping our hearts out and stomping on them just destroying us. So I did appreciate that we got an ending that ended in a very heartwarming way. However, my pretty much biggest critique of this book, and only critique of this book, was the ending, unfortunately. So it ends with Alice defeating Grimes and trading Peter's soul for his, and then ascending back to the land of the living with Peter. I found this to be quite unsatisfactory. I didn't like that she brought Peter back and went back up with him, and there's a couple reasons for this, so let me explain. So first off, Peter sacrificed himself, and personally I feel like if you're gonna have your character choose to do this, then let their sacrifice mean something and let them stay dead. He made his choice and he accepted it with open arms and a smile, literally. So let him have that choice, you know what I mean? Additionally, from page 1, the stakes had been growing and growing and growing until he died in the Escher trap, right? Like that was the highest the stakes had been at that point. So to have such a convenient loophole that allows one of your characters to come back from the dead means that the stakes were never really there to begin with. And I personally don't like that. Now, I know that, quote, hell has no rules, but I do still struggle to reconcile some of the inconsistencies within hell itself. So somehow, Alice was able to recreate Peter's pentagram algorithm to trade souls after only having seen it one time. When she saw it, she had that tattoo that gave her perfect memory. When she recreated it, the tattoo had been washed away by the Lethe. Her internal monologue as she's recreating this pentagram is the following. How much harder it was to reach for memories she wasn't sure were there. Blurred now were the lines between memory and imagination. Her memory of Peter's notes might have been tainted by her imagination that he was going to betray her. So it just felt a little too convenient that she was able to remember it perfectly, and somehow recreate it in one go with no mistakes. Although she did work well under pressure and she had sniffed chalk like the day before, so I don't know, maybe that helped her out. Who am I to say? Another inconsistency though, I'm having such a hard time saying that word. Another inconsistency though is when they first meet Elspeth and she tells them what happens to a creature that is living, a human that is living within the underworld, right? On page 233, Elspeth says, when you die in hell, it's not just your mortal body that disintegrates, it's your soul stuff too. She smacked her chest. All this, it dissipates. If you die down here, that's it for you. Total annihilation of the self. When Peter died, that would mean that his soul was annihilated. His personhood was annihilated. So how is it that there was a soul left over for Alice to trade with? And even if there was still a soul, because souls are infinite in this world, it wouldn't be the same Peter. It would have been a completely different Peter, but that wasn't acknowledged. So I'm just a little confused on that. However, I will admit that these inconsistencies do fit really well in this story with the whole idea of paradoxes throughout the novel. A good magician in this world is one who can simultaneously hold opposing beliefs within their mind. So I see what Kuang was doing here, and I see that perhaps I have my own biases in that I'm too reliant on the classical logic that she talked about in here, the law of non-contradiction and the law of the excluded middle. I just personally wish she'd done something a little differently, and I think there still could have been a version of this story that had a happy ending that did not involve Alice and Peter leaving together as a couple. I didn't think there needed to be a makeout session between them in front of King Yama. It was a little much and I didn't like it. I'd have much preferred to see Alice go back up alone or have chosen to trade Grimes' soul with Elspeth's. This whole book is Alice's journey of personal self-discovery. It's about her recognizing that she has some serious deep-seated internalized misogyny that needs to be worked through. It's about her coming to terms with the fact that her oppression is not her fault, but rather the fault of institutionalized power structures that would prevent her from ever succeeding in the way that she wanted to succeed. And her version of success was to literally become Grimes' echo. But Grimes is a man and she is a woman, and in a system that is plagued by sexism, that is not possible. And so to have chosen Peter, a man who in some ways is quite similar to Grimes, felt like we were taking one step forward and two steps back. And yeah, not to mention that he is a man who is quite disrespectful towards Alice, and she genuinely knows nothing about him. She admits to knowing nothing about him All she really knows on an intimate level is his quirky study habits, but she doesn't know anything about him as a person beyond academia. He never apologized for the way that he treated her when Grimes was alive. He literally witnessed her being assaulted, and even if he didn't hear her say no or stop, you can't tell me that he didn't see the fear in her eyes. And instead of talking to her, instead of trying to find out the truth, what did he do? He proceeded to make crude jokes and spread suggestive rumors about her being a teacher's pet. I don't vibe with that. I don't like him. And when he finally comes clean to Alice about having Crohn's disease, she says to him, "Why didn't you ever tell me?" And his response is, "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Implying like, why didn't you ever tell me about being assaulted? And the thing is, she did try to tell him on several occasions, and he ignored and avoided her every attempt at communication. His behavior was just a little too similar to Grimy Grimes, who stonewalled Alice. Why are we choosing this man? I would not choose a man like this for myself. He had his small redemption arc after that chapter from his perspective, and he made his choice to die. Let's leave it at that, you know what I mean? The ending honestly felt more like a tragedy disguised as a happy ending than as an actual happy ending. I feel like she saved Peter more out of guilt and a debt that she thought that she could never repay to him than out of love for him. And to me, that's quite sad. In a book about feminist self-discovery, I really would have liked to see Alice choose herself and reflect on her own flaws, because you can't love someone else if you don't love yourself. I think it also would have been really fitting for her to have chosen Elspeth to trade with Grimes' soul. They did share genuine apologies. They found comfort in each other, and it's with Elspeth that Alice, for the first time in who knows how long, actually tells the truth and is not secretly competing with her or hating her the way that she did with every other woman in academia. It's like, for the first time, there was no internalized misogyny in this woman-to-woman interaction. And not to mention, Alice literally said, "Come with me," because she knew Elspeth wanted to return back to life so badly. But even then, like, Elspeth made her choice to stay in hell. She wanted to do things in her own way, in her own time, and so trading her soul for Grimes would have been disrespectful and selfish. And I will rest my case that she should have just gone back up alone. Now, I would not have such a critical opinion on this ending if Alice and Peter actually had chemistry and genuine apologies were given from both parties. I would not have had this opinion if they had a solid friendship to build a romantic relationship off of. The flashbacks of them being friends felt more like a daydream of what Alice desired in a romantic partner, rather than, the story of a blooming friendship. And they never really got the chance to truly become friends while in hell because the stakes were so high, which caused them to fight rather than get to know each other. Both of them are super flawed characters, and yet both of them deserve to have happy endings and deserved a chance to heal. Just not together, in my opinion. I think there also was a way for Alice to have dispelled of Grimes' shade without needing to do a soul trade. Throughout the novel, there's several mentions of how the shades enjoy their punishment, and it's more like a refuge than an actual punishment. Hell gives the sinners exactly what they wanted, and in every court, the shades have the option to just leave, but because they enjoy the way that they're being punished, they don't. In the end, in that second to last chapter, Grimes told Alice exactly what he wanted. He wanted to stay in hell, and she should have given him that. When King Yama asked her, "Are you finished with your audience?" she had finished, standing up to him and saying exactly what she wanted to say to him. And if she had said yes, King Yama would have been like, "Okay, bye, he's gone for good, you don't ever have to see that man again." Okay, rant over. And aside from that, I truly did just love absolutely everything about this book. And I do want to just discuss a couple of things that I think were so well executed by Kuang. The running themes of memory and truth and lies and unreliability stood out to me very much because they were so detailed and well balanced throughout the book. And I just loved the way that she chose to explore these ideas, specifically that of memory. I honestly can't say that I've read too many books where memory plays such a prominent role as it does in Katabasis, but it made a lot of sense for this book because this is a book that critiques academia, a world where your worth as a student is very often based upon your rote memorization skills. In Greek and Roman mythology, the river Lethe is one of 5 rivers in the underworld, and it is the river of forgetfulness. I'd like to quickly just look at some interpretations in two Roman texts, one from Virgil and one from Ovid. So this is Virgil's Aeneid, and this is how he describes the Lethe. We are sent to wide Elysium. A few of us stay in this happy place until long years have purged the final taint of matter and time's great wheel has come full circle. Only ether's spirit, the fire of pure air, remains. When the rest have cycled through 1,000 years, the gods call them in clusters to the river Lethe. These forgetful spirits hope for resurrection into bodies. They start to want to see the sky. The Lethe here is a thing of oblivion, but it is a peaceful and, kind oblivion. Ovid's description in the Metamorphoses is also quite similar. Here mute repose abides, and from the bottom of the cave, the waters of the sleep-inducing Lethe flow murmuring across their bed of pebbles. Outside, in front, the fruitful poppies bloom, and countless herbs as well. That dewy night collects and processes, extracting sleep, which it distributes to the darkened earth. There's no mention of reincarnation here, but it too is a thing of peace. Kuang's version of the Lethe. It is both a peaceful thing, but also a violent thing. It's reincarnation and it's also death. It's a murmuring river and it's also a turbulent ocean. It's a paradox, and more often than not, it's something that is violent. It's something that the shades in the underworld avoid at all costs. Venturing into the Lethe means reincarnation, but it's not the peaceful one described in the Aeneid by Virgil. Here, losing your memories is the same as losing your identity, and this loss of personhood is equated with death. What's the point in having a soul that reincarnates and is infinite if your memories are finite? It's a terrifying prospect. Even the language that Kuang uses to describe the Lethe is quite violent. The Lethe eats your memory, the Lethe absorbs your memory, it strips away your truths, it dissolves you into a beating black, swallowing all, releasing nothing. That's scary. It seems that the Lethe is only peaceful and merciful for those that want to forget, for those that want to give up their personhood and die. And this can be true for Alice throughout this story, although not really, because the first time that she is drawn to the Lethe, it's described as being stronger than a siren's call. In Greek mythology, sirens lure sailors to their deaths by singing beautiful songs with lyrics that they know will entrance the sailors. In Homer's Odyssey, Odysseus has his crew plug their ears with wax and then tie him to a mast so that he can hear their songs without being seduced to his death. And then every time after that, every time Alice is drawn back to the Lethe, it's when she's having suicidal thoughts and wants to drown and wants to give up. And so if living and dying in this world are two sides to the same coin, and dying is equated with forgetting, then does that mean that remembering and forgetting are also two sides to the same coin? I think that they are, because after Alice gets her tattoo, her memory is both perfect and imperfect. She's able to memorize entire books, entire languages, but she struggles with simple daily tasks. This is on page 154. She had to focus hard on a simple tomato before her brain recognized it as a tomato and not apple, not dodgeball, not bloody, beating human heart. She did not tell him how easy it was to lose herself in the wash, how it happened every time she let her attention slip. She did not tell him, I have to rebuild a staircase by the hour to keep in my mind who I am, where I am, and what I am doing. Earlier, Alice explained how a friend of hers in neuroscience told her that eyesight is largely memory. Your brain sees a pattern and then fills in the blanks based on what it remembers. So if she has perfect academic memorization skills, but is also confusing tomatoes for dodgeballs, then her memory is both imperfect and perfect. And this is one of the problems that threatens to break classical logic in this book, and it's executed so well. And just the interpretation of the Lethe as a whole is super unique, very good, just very good. I'd also like to just quickly discuss the role that unreliability, truth and lies play throughout this book. I'd argue that Alice is an unreliable narrator, and I know that it's third person, but because it's limited third person and is almost exclusively about Alice's internal monologue, then I'm just gonna go with she's the narrator. Just roll with it, okay? We all know that Kuang can write an exceptionally good unreliable narrator. I mean, June Hayward in Yellowface is like the unreliablest. Is that even a word? But it's very clear from the start of Yellowface that June is straight up lying to our faces. It's not as clear with Alice, it's quite subtle. And these characters are unreliable for very different reasons, and it was just really cool to see Kuang kind of explore different kinds of unreliability. So June lies to justify her atrocious behavior. She lies to get away with being a racist thief. Alice, on the other hand, while yes, she is deeply flawed, is not lying to justify anything. She's not lying to convince you that she's a good person. I wouldn't even say that she is lying. It's more that she's obscuring the truth and is cutting away the parts of herself that she's ashamed of. I picked up on an inconsistency in the first 10 pages of the book. On page 5, Alice said, Peter never crowed or condescended, but then on page 9, she completely contradicted herself and said, this was just like Peter, condescending. And because of that, I continued to look for instances of unreliability throughout the book. I did find quite a few. Lots of instances where the truth gets slightly distorted. A lot of it is in the characterization of Peter, Grimes, and even Alice herself. In the Court of Desire, Alice judges the Shades for not being able to just get up and walk away from their addictions, and yet Alice is an addict herself. She's a smoker. I'd say that she's kind of addicted to academia as well. Peter is often both unfailingly kind and rudely inconsiderate. Grimes is often near godlike and also monstrous. And the description of Grimes being like the sun, something that is difficult to look at for a long period of time, to look at super closely because it burns your eyes, perfectly encapsulates these conflicting versions of him. To Alice, he's both beautifully innocent and terrifyingly predatory. And again, this unreliability fits really well into the idea of magic being an act of telling lies about the world, of magic being the creation of paradoxes. Magic works when confusion is sown into the audience. We are the audience as the readers. Everything must be filtered through a facade of potential lies. From the beginning of this book, Alice is completely exhausted. She is not eating. She has not slept in like 3 weeks. I don't know how she's running at this point on only lembas bread and coffee. She has pushed herself to the absolute limits of her body. In chapter 13, Peter mentioned that when Alice gets sleepy, she tells absurd lies. And so if she's exhausted throughout the entirety of this book, what does that say about the narrative that we're reading? Alice is an excellent magician, but she has largely failed to uphold the most basic rule of magic. Never fully believe your own lies. Be able to hold different versions of reality in your mind. Alice has deluded herself about the truth of Grimes, about the truth of herself, and she's done this as a form of protection. This is on page 322. Believe the lie. Trust the lie. It is the only thing you have. Stay in the cage and paint the walls. If you do not, then you must quit. But if you can delude yourself long enough, then your delusions might very well come true. Alice has deluded herself into believing that there are no systems of oppression against women in this world, that any assault against her was her own fault, and that any academic failure was because she didn't work hard enough. Page 323, she thinks to herself, no longer a student, a mind, an inquisitive being growing and learning and becoming under him, but just the barest identity she had been afraid to be all along, which was a mere woman. It was all such a fucking cliche. How could she have ever dared to think it did not apply? Alice is unreliable because she had cut away the parts that she was too afraid to show, that she was ashamed of, like the assault. This is such a common experience among survivors of sexual assault. It often feels like the only way to get through each day, the only way to survive, is to delude yourself into believing that the violence inflicted upon you was your own fault. It's why victim blaming works so well, unfortunately. It's self-preservation to create a paradox, an illusion about yourself. And in a book where your character literally goes to hell and is in constant threat of dying, they must bend the truth and become unreliable in order to survive. All it would have ever taken was an honest word, but that was precisely what magicians lacked. There were no honest words, only puns and illusions and constructions of reality so convoluted that you couldn't keep track anymore of what was real and what wasn't. Everyone was always trying so hard to pretend they were somebody else. Should you read this book? I mean, if you're watching this, you definitely probably have read the book. So then the question is, should you reread this book and should you recommend it to people? And the answer is absolutely, and I will personally be going out of my way to recommend this and all of Kuang's other works for years to come. I'm so excited for her next book. I believe it's called Taipei Story, or that's the tentative title, I'm not sure, but it's really been such a joy to watch her craft evolve and grow with each book. So that is it for my review and discussion, and if you have watched this far into the video, thank you so much, and as always, stay nerdy. Let me know what you thought of Katabasis by R.F. Kuang, if you agreed with this review, if you didn't agree with this review. I'd love to hear any and all thoughts. And with that, I will see you guys in the next one, so bye for now.